I'm going to record this one because I'm going to kind of leave the lecture on getting toward the Enlightenment through Roman history and all that. I'm going to leave that because I can shorten that or lengthen that however I need to. But this one you have to have. This is kind of the last little piece that you need for your state test. So we're going to do it now so we make sure we don't shortchange it and we don't miss out on it. So let me share the screen, and I'm recording this twice just to make sure I get a good copy of it for students at home, which is coming very handy, by the way, for people. And by the way, I do have a lot of people that are doing this. They're just checking out, and that's fine. You know, do your other work, whatever, but you're going to have to listen to this one because you're not going to get things right if you don't. Okay, so it's been stunning to me too to see how little people really know about this topic, which is really fascinating. Like, how do we actually choose our presidents? You'd think we'd know that answer before we leave elementary school. But unfortunately, that's not the case, I'm learning. Now, a couple of warnings. Your next big writing assignment is to take a primary source document and dissect it. What is that document in the activity guide that dropped yesterday? Yeah, Federalist 10. Now you're going to see in Federalist 10, he's going to use the word Republican and federalism. He's talking about concepts there, governmental concepts, not political parties. Don't get confused there. Those parties did not exist at the time he wrote this. They were still years away. What he's talking about is systems of organized government, Republican, federalism, kind of an American invention, which kind of worked out for a lot of countries actually. So I'm going to be very much a hawk on capitalization. If you don't get your capitalization right on these, I'm going to throw it back at you with at least a 10% penalty just for capitalization errors. So make sure you check your capitalization, make sure your sentences are sentences and they have periods and good commas and all that kind of good stuff. Make sure you start it with a strong thesis statement. Make sure you make your points, and there's definitely specific points on Federalist 10 that you have to make, and if you don't make those points, you'll be redoing it, okay? This is a well-researched thing, and so we know what to expect in a great essay, a great research paper. If you're talking about the democratic process as a process, or democracy as like we vote, it's a small d. Sometimes we even say small d democracy because people get it confused that democracy is the Democratic Party. No, 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 no. Democracy is a form of government and it's a process of voting. Small d democracy. However, if you're using the Democratic Party, it's a proper noun. Democratic Party, the Democrats, the Dems, D, all these are terms used for the Democrats, large D there. You have to cap it. And if you don't cap it, if you don't capitalize Democratic Party, I will take 10% off and say, fix it. Same thing with the Republican Party. Now, if you're talking, this is a little trickier. If you're talking about the Republic as an alternative means of saying the United States of America, then you'd cap it. The Republic is the United States of America, then you can cap it. However, if you're talking about a Republican form of government, such as what Madison is doing, then it's lowercase. Now, here's the other thing. We live in a small r republic. We live in a small d democracy. That's the system. That's the form of government, like the Greeks would have defined it. If you're talking about the Republican Party, you capitalize it. Republican Party, or he's a Republican, put a cap on it. Also, there's a synonym for Republican Party called the Grand Old Party. This goes way, way back to the 1800s. Grand Old Party is the GOP, Party of Lincoln. GOP, Grand Old Party, same thing, capital R. Make sense? Okay, so make sure you get those right, really important. Also too, what we've taught for centuries and centuries and centuries is the political spectrum. People who have similar opinions or political issues are grouped according to whether they are left, right, or center. Okay, now this has worked up until recently, right? Basically, if you're a liberal and you're all on the left, what do you want? Change, right? Now, of course, there's people who can be too radical, like, anarchists, okay, right? Which we throw here. That's why that was such a fun conversation. But yeah, that's not part of our politics. We don't literally put up with that, okay? Left, liberal, change. Center means, well, some change, some not so change. To be conservative or to the right means what? What do you want? The status quo, to stay the same. the status quo. Make sure you use those terms. Right now, of course, when you get too far out there, you got your reactionaries and your radicals on that side too, right? But we have a new phenomenon in this that doesn't fit the chart. And it's called nationalism, where it's all about a personality and a person and not about the policies. I'll prove that to you as we go through this lecture. Trump has unleashed something that's new to American politics. Well, at least we haven't seen it. I can't find it. I can't envision it. All the way back to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson had this, right? And former President Trump has this. But it's not about the policy, whether it's change or not change, or moderate or whatever. It's about the person themselves, right? And so the former president advocated some pretty liberal left positions, but he's also advocated some pretty right conservative positions. And so the chart doesn't seem to work for him. He's kind of carved out a new definition for himself. So how did he get to become president? Well, he won in the primaries. 50 states have primaries, 50 states. The Republicans have primaries, the Democrats have primaries, and you collect delegates as you go from state to state to state. Then you go to a convention and all those delegates show up. Roughly 2,000 show up for the Republican convention. That's how many they allow to be elected. And about 4,000 for the Democrats. The numbers vary from year to year. But these are people from those parties that go to a national convention and actually say, this is going to be our nominee. And that's the person we want to represent our party, either the GOP or the Dems, in the quest for this place. And this is the residence of the President of the United States. It's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So whenever you hear 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you're talking about the president, you're talking about the Oval Office. It's actually a residence. People actually live here while they're president. And the thing is, there's also special rooms below ground. There is tons of stuff going on. We call it the what? Was it always white? Remember I taught you that term, whitewashing? Okay, well, here's what happened here. In the War of 1812, a British army landed and burned our capital to the ground. James Madison, yes, the father of the Constitution, was president at the time, and he could not hold the line. He was the last president who was ever actually on the battlefield. And he had to flee. Dolly Madison had to flee. Got the big portrait of George Washington off the wall in time to escape. And the British officers came into this executive mansion, it was called. It was not white, it was stone. Had a nice lunch, and then burned it to the ground. The charred remains can still be seen in parts of it underneath. You can still see the charred, the black chars there. When they decided to rebuild it, instead of tearing it down, starting over, to cut costs, they just rebuilt it from the inside out and painted it white to cover up the burn marks. It was whitewashed. Came to the White House. Now, you get lots of servants and everything like that. Every need the president might have or his family might have is taken care of because they got to concentrate on running the government, don't you know? And the last occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, as you know, was Donald J. Trump. Now, how did he win? Well, he beat probably one of the most prepared people ever to become president or to run for president since going back to John Quincy Adams. She had been first lady. She had been a senator from New York. She had been Secretary of State. Her resume was unbelievable. And she would have been the first woman president too. So it looks like she had the inside track. Everyone thought she was going to win. Everyone thought she was going to win, including Donald J. Trump. The shocker came in that she really kind of ran a terrible campaign. And Donald J. Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary by 2.7, 2.8 million votes. So I'm just going to say something here, and I need you to pay attention as I close this door so I get a good recording. So the thing is, twice in your lifetime, the person that got the most votes of the people, the popular vote, lost the presidency and didn't become president. Because the opponent won in what we call the Electoral College. It almost happened a third time, and it could certainly happen a fourth in your lifetime. All right, so how did it happen? Well, here's the system. Every state gets a limited number of people who can actually vote for president, defined in the Constitution. let's like take 3 states as the example. California has 55 votes for president. Utah has 6. Wyoming has 3, as does Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So wait a minute. So how do we get to the number in California, 55? How do we get to the number in Utah, 6? And how do we get to Wyoming's 3? Yes.
The population percentage.
Population is a part of it. So that's a partial answer. Give me the full answer and get to the exact number 6 or 3 or 55. Yes.
Basically, the way it works is any given state has at least 3, and then you get.
Oh yeah, that's true. Everybody has at least 3, but why? Why do you get 3? How do you get to actual number 3? It's simpler than you're making it. Last classes struggled like crazy for this.
150 of the votes are just given to any given state.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause. Let's resume the recording. So this class got the answer very quickly. Okay, it's very simple formula. Population, you were correct in what you said there, in that we do a census every 10 years, and then we allocate, right, house districts. This is the part that you're missing. The house districts per state. So how many house districts does Utah get based on our population? How many members of the House come from Utah? Yes. 4. How many total, listen carefully, how many total members of the House of Representatives are there? 435. We've covered that before. How many senators are there? So you get 2 for every senator and however many House districts you have. So that's how Utah gets 6. Wyoming gets 3 because they only have 1 member of the House and they have 2 senators. And California has 2 senators and 53 in this election, 53 members of the House. All right. Now, there is a total then of how many electoral votes total? How many actual people are electors that actually get to vote for president? 538.
Oh, because, yeah.
Why the difference? You caught it quickly. Who gets the 3? DC. DC is not a state. It's not in a state. It's 20 by 20 miles, defined in the Constitution to be the nation's capital. But here's the thing. It has a much bigger population than Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, or Delaware. And yet those people went and languished with no say in who the president was for a long time. Finally, they passed an amendment, which you'll need to know, the 23rd Amendment, that gives DC not however many it should have based on its population, because that could be a few more. They could have like 4 or 5, but the equal to the smallest state, which is Wyoming. So DC gets 3 regardless. It's going to get 3, always get 3. Okay. But at least they now have some electoral votes. Okay. So now let's take a look at this. Let's look at the math again. California, Utah, and Wyoming. Which of those 3 states has a bigger say for its residents, as to who gets to be president?
Wyoming.
Raise your hand if it's California. Raise your hand if it's Utah. Raise your hand if it's Wyoming. The correct answer is Wyoming. Let me explain. For every vote in California and Utah, you need roughly 800,000 people for 1 member of the House, for 1 electoral vote. Roughly 750 to 950. Every state's a little different because the census isn't exactly equal, right? They have to divide the whole census by 435. And so some are going to get a little more and some are going to get a less. Wyoming's case, they get 1 member for less than 500,000 people in the House, 2 senators, so divide it up. So roughly every 150,000 people in Wyoming get to vote for president, for an elector. And in California, it's more like 750 to 800,000. In Utah, it's about the same. We're now at the high end right now. We were this close to getting 7, but we missed out. Okay, so that right there means that the smaller rural states have a disproportionate say in who gets to be president because every state gets at least 2. All right, now, here's the other little twist in the system. You ready? Pay very careful attention to this. It's a winner-take-all system. So say, for example, let's take a state like Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a classic case, or we could even do Georgia. All right, let's do Wisconsin though, because that pertained to the Trump win in 2016. In Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are called the Big Blue Wall. Why? Because they have voted with the Democrats since FDR back in the 1930s. Always reliable vote for Democrats, right? Gonna guarantee you're gonna get those states. Except for things have changed demographically in those states. And so what happened is President Trump saw the opening, former president, when he campaigned, he was heavy in Pennsylvania, heavy in Michigan, especially heavy in Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton never traveled to Wisconsin. She would lose the state by, I think, just like 10 or 15,000 votes. One visit, she could have made up that difference. Spent a little more time there, maybe 2-3 visits to make sure. But she lost the Big Blue Wall. Because if you win Wisconsin by 50% plus 1, you get all 10 electoral votes. If you win Pennsylvania by 50% plus 1, you get all 20 electoral votes. If you win California by just 1 vote out of 39 million cast, boom, you get 55 votes. In Utah, it's guaranteed that whoever the Republican nominee is, they are guaranteed 6 electoral votes, because this state will vote for the Republican period no matter what. Some states are what we call flyover states, like Utah. We all know how it's going to vote. So you're going to spend time and money campaigning there? Trump made a token trip. People will come here to raise money, but they're not going to come here unless it's primary season. And then every candidate's going to want to come to Utah if it's primary season. Because before you can actually run for president and win in the Electoral College and get the magic number to win, which, by the way, just for your notes and really important here, is 270. You have to have 270 to win. If you don't get 270, if it's 269, it's a tie, and things get really weird after that. But in this case, former President Trump won these 3 states, took them away from the Democrats, and gets basically the night of the election, it was 306, but it got modified a little bit later because of things we'll tell you about in Maine and Nebraska. But he wins 304 to Hillary Clinton's 227. Yet she won the popular vote by 2.7 million, the most votes ever for a losing candidate. All right, now let's jump ahead 4 years. Now tables are going to turn a little bit. Joe Biden really scared President Trump as the person that had the best chance to beat him. I honestly do believe there was no other candidate on the list that could have beaten President Trump, except Joe Biden, who, by the way, grew up in Pennsylvania, Scranton, has close ties to working class people in Michigan, Wisconsin. He's been a working class person all along. And he got those 3 states back, and then shocked the world. Georgia, which had voted for the conservative candidate since, well, Nixon, way back before that. Let's go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. Biden wins it by something like 10 to 12,000, under 15,000 votes. And the same thing happened in Arizona. Arizona is a reliably conservative state. A lot of old people living there. 11 electoral votes guaranteed for the Republicans. 16 electoral votes guaranteed for the Republicans. Didn't happen this time. Trump lost Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But then again, the win, listen carefully, was razor thin. I think it's less than 100,000 votes for the 3 states. Trump almost pulled this off again. But the shocker for him was that he lost Georgia, and he lost Arizona too, by less than 15,000 votes in each state, I believe. So the question very simply is, can Donald Trump become president again? And I would think right now the odds are literally 50-50 that he will be. Now, here's the thing. He loses the popular vote. By the way, Trump got more votes than any person ever in American history, 74 million in this last election, except for one other person who got more, almost 8 million more, and his name was Joseph R. Biden. It was the biggest turnout in American history in over 100 years. But a lot can happen in 4 years. And President Trump, and here's the shocker, here's the little piece of evidence. I'm glad I waited for this lecture until this little piece of evidence came in. We've got data, let's use data. Among primary voters in the Republican Party in the state of Iowa, Donald Trump has 75% support. Unprecedented. His closest competitor, I think, was the governor of Florida, DeSantis. He had like 10. Somebody else was in there at about 12 or something. But to be president, you first have to win delegates. And this delegate thing, you have to go to every state. So even for Joseph Biden, right, who's a Democrat, is he going to win in the Electoral College in Utah? Absolutely not. But he's going to come here anyway during the primaries because he needs the Democrats in Utah to give him the primary delegates to win the nomination when they have their convention to actually nominate him to be on the ballot against the former President Trump. Barack Obama came here, Hillary Clinton didn't, and Barack Obama got more votes out of Utah for the primary to get him over the top to make him the nominee for the Democrats, and he beat Hillary Clinton because he was willing to campaign here. Idaho, bright red state. We've learned that in the last few days, haven't we? But here's the deal. Obama overwhelmingly won the delegates from that state. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to win 50% plus one in the primaries. You can win what we call a plurality, very key term. If you just win 35% and yet the nearest competitor only wins 30, and then it goes down from there, then you will get most of the delegates out of Iowa. And you go state by state by state until you accumulate delegates. Now, Iowa's first. How does Iowa get to be first? Well, one day they woke up and they said, we want to be first. So they voted a state law that says we will be first. And the political parties, though, determine this. This is not determined by your country. It's not determined by the Congress. It's not determined by, it's determined by the Democratic and Republican parties. They decide this. And these guys are outside the government. They're not part of the government. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not part of your US government. They're outside of the government. And they've come up with this schedule. And both parties kind of agree and follow a very similar schedule. It starts in Iowa, but Iowa, wow, first had always been this state. What's this state? You know which one by its shape? New Hampshire. By the way, you have to memorize these four. Then this state, Nevada, and then this state, South Carolina. You have to know them. Let's say them. Ready? Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. They're the first four. But of all of them, it's Iowa that becomes the most important because it's first. Now, New Hampshire had always been first, but they're a primary state. Now, listen carefully. What that means is primary state is you actually have a ballot and you vote on that ballot. So you go down a list of candidates and you say your preference on the ballot. In Iowa, it's different. It's called a caucus and it's wild. And it's because they were able to go first because they do this kind of wild thing where you show up. They have 99 counties and districts within that. And so 99 counties. And so they go to their local school and everybody shows up with a sign, right? They got these signs. And all the candidates have people in each of these meetings holding up a sign. And you go and you gravitate to the sign of your candidate. And when you get there, everybody says, okay, we've had 150 people show up to our little caucus meeting here at a very small town elementary school. All right, but these candidates don't meet the threshold. There's less than 10% there. So you guys got to go somewhere else. So the candidates that don't have enough people show up, those people get to go to somebody else. And they're yelling at each other, hey, come and support my guy, come and support my person, whatever. It's just wild. It's great fun. We used to be a caucus state. Caucus states are a blast. I don't know how fun they'd be today, though, if you went to a Republican primary and you had the Republican faction under Romney and the faction under Trump. And I wonder how that would turn out. So we've gone to a ballot thing. But caucuses are great fun. You get to know your neighbors, you get to know what they think, you get to talk, you get to practice democracy, right? But they're first. The next week it goes to New Hampshire, and then there's a primary. Then it goes to Nevada. How did Nevada get to become such a prominent player? And then it goes to South Carolina. Well, here's what I like about this system. First of all, you have to start small. To campaign in Iowa, you need at least $50 million. But imagine if we started with Florida. Now, Florida represents the population better. It's much more of a, reflection of the whole country as a whole, except for one thing. It's actually 5 separate states to campaign in, and you have to do it in multiple languages. You have to campaign in Spanish, you have to campaign in English, and you also have to, the northern region is very conservative, old South. The central region, there's a lot of people that have moved there recently because of those theme parks. Then you've got the heavy Miami area, big Cuban population, Venezuela, and so on. And then you just got, everything in between. And it's just a rough place to campaign. You need hundreds of millions of dollars there. But here, people can actually get to know, and in New Hampshire, it's even smaller. That's why the Iowa State Fair becomes important. Well before the primaries even held, all the candidates are going to show up at the Iowa State Fair. Here's former President Trump, here's former President Biden, or President Biden. Romney was a candidate. I don't know if you remember that. Here's Buttigieg, here's Elizabeth Warren. Who's this guy running? Bernie Sanders, right? Good old Bernie Sanders. Now, listen, here's the thing. When whoever shows up in Iowa, you know what they're thinking about. Didn't I show you clips of former President Trump just a couple of weeks ago in Iowa, campaigning for a senator there, Chuck Grassley? Grassley's famous. He's been in Congress forever, but he is the first to campaign in all 99 counties, all 99 of them. Why they didn't make it even 100, I don't know. All 99 counties in one election. And if you're a really good candidate, you try to hit all 99. So it's called the full Grassley, is what it's called, the full Grassley. But if you don't show up here, they have booths for every candidate. You get to know the candidates. The candidates will be there. You can talk to them. And then they'll put the Des Moines Register, the #1 paper in the state, who does the best job with their polling, by the way. And they have a soapbox, and all the candidates get up and give a speech. It's really great. And if you don't eat the local food, well, guess what? That's a snub. You got to eat the local food. Here's Pete Buttigieg on the soapbox. He's now a member of the cabinet, Biden's cabinet. Youngest candidate ever, LGBTQ candidate, first openly gay candidate ever to run for president. So he kind of becomes an historic figure. So I leave him in the lecture. But here's what happened on the GOP side. On the GOP side, going into Iowa, it looked like Jeb Bush was going to running away. 23%, Chris Christie 10%, whatever. This is Des Moines Register saying this is how it's stacking up in Iowa. And then there was the first debate in advance of Iowa. And I got to see that debate by kind of accident. I was in Milwaukee for a big triathlon event. And at night, you got to get some good food and you also got to chill a little bit. And I'm walking past this bar and they had all the screens, big screens, normally sporting events, and it was all this debate. And so I kind of slip into the back because it was really crowded and I could just slip into the back right there and watched. And I'm going, oh my goodness, because somebody decided to enter the race late. And his name was Donald Trump, who'd always been kind of a joke in this because every 4 years he said, I'm going to run for president. I'm going to run for president. He'd been saying this since the 1980s. He actually did it this time. And when he showed up, his style of campaigning was, well, he was funny. B, he was caustic. 2, 3, he antagonized his opponents. He interrupted them all the time. So it was like he was the only one up there talking. And he ridiculed in the most unflattering ways the leading candidate, Jeb Bush, in a true takedown. And then he learned to use Twitter. And he started this attack campaign, and Jeb Bush did not do well. In the first GOP debate, here's the folks that debated there, GOP, and Trump takes second in Iowa, and nobody thought he had a chance to even get us a point on the board. Only the first 3 candidates actually get delegates. Rubio from Florida, Ted Cruz would win it. Strong evangelical population there, and he belongs to that group. But look, he took second, shocked the world. Also, what shocked the world was Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders took down the most obvious person who was going to be president that ever ran, and he almost tied her. And some say, because it was a caucus, that if they'd ever actually counted the votes, he would have won, because they're counting caucus counts different than that. Point is he suddenly now had a race. And here is the liberal progressive voice of the Democratic Party emerging. His movement is bigger than Trump's. And he is saying that the economy is not working for average everyday people. Oh, by the way, guess who was also saying that same thing? Both of them, this is what I'm saying. It's not so much the issues, right? It's the personalities. Bernie Sanders created a huge following in this election, as did Donald J. Trump, and both of them did something special. They brought people out to vote that had never voted before. Mainly people angry about how the economy of the United States is limping along and struggling for them as personally as families. That's why I showed you that one video about the middle class and how it's kind of disappeared. A week later, guess who wins 35% in New Hampshire and walks away with most of the delegates? You don't need to win more than 35% if you have a scattered field. But right now in Iowa, Trump has 75% approval among the people that would vote in this primary. His chance of getting the nomination look really good now. Look at what Bernie did to Hillary in New Hampshire. She was now in the second fight of her life because she also went the rounds full through 50 states before Obama got enough delegates to become the nominee. Now she finds herself in a fight with Bernie Sanders. Perfect place to end.